Okay, so revenge. It doesn't always come with a loud roar. Sometimes it's just a whisper. One single decision, one powerful word, and suddenly an entire empire can crumble. For Caitlin Clark, her revenge wasn't about throwing shade on social media or getting into heated interviews. Nope, her revenge was devastatingly simple. She just said no. No to Geno Auriemma. No to UConn's legendary status. And here's the kicker, no to $1 million offer that literally came crawling back to her years later.
Like I said earlier, they actually had odds that, she was like third or fourth in the betting odds to be MVP of the WNBA. That's such a slap in the face to every WNBA player. It's unbelievable, right?
Now, on paper, this sounds absolutely absurd, right? I mean, who in their right mind walks away from over $1 million for just 8 weeks of basketball? But here's the thing, this wasn't just some regular contract. This was actually a lifeline, a desperate plea from a man who had once completely dismissed her, belittled her, and treated her like she was an afterthought. So when Clark rejected that offer, she wasn't just passing on a paycheck. Oh no, she was humbling the one man who genuinely thought he could never be humbled.
That's the worst part about new fans. They have no perspective. There's no context. So they just say ridiculous nonsense.
And honestly, that's what makes this entire story so much bigger than just basketball. It's not just about points or assists or even trophies. It's fundamentally about power. For decades, Geno Auriemma was essentially the gatekeeper of women's basketball, the coach who decided who mattered, who got the spotlight, and who simply faded into obscurity. But then Caitlin Clark totally flipped that script. She didn't need his approval, she didn't need his program, and she certainly didn't need his checkbook. Instead, she built her own empire without him. And when he finally reached out, she turned him away with the kind of quiet authority that screamed, "I don't need you, you need me." See, every revenge story has to start with a mistake, and Geno's wasn't a blown play or a bad timeout. Oh no, it was pure, blinding arrogance. Before Clark became the absolute face of the sport, before the sold-out arenas and the record-shattering TV ratings, she was just a kid with a dream. She openly admitted it. UConn, for her, was the coolest place on earth. It was the dynasty, the empire, the home of legends like Taurasi, Moore, Stewart, the undisputed mountaintop of women's basketball. For a girl growing up in Iowa, there was truly nothing bigger. So when recruitment time rolled around, the path seemed obvious. The most electrifying talent of her generation, pairing up with arguably the greatest recruiter the game had ever known. But here's the crazy part. The call never came. Geno never picked up the phone, never called Clark herself, never even called her parents, barely sending a message through her AAU coach. For the greatest recruiter of all time, that silence wasn't just silence, it was deafening. And what's more, it wasn't an oversight, it was a choice. The message was crystal clear, she wasn't their priority. His excuse? UConn had already locked in Paige Vickers, and he didn't want 2-point guards. On the surface, okay maybe, but then came the absolute insult. Geno suggested that if Clark really wanted UConn, she should have called him. Think about that for a second. The coach, who built his entire legacy on spotting once-in-a-generation talent years before anyone else, decided Caitlin Clark wasn't worth the effort. Then, he blamed a teenager for not chasing him. That wasn't just a recruiting miss. That was pure disrespect, the kind you simply don't forget. And in return, Clark quietly filed it away. If Geno didn't believe in her, well, she'd go somewhere that did. So she chose Iowa, a program without UConn's banners, its mystique, or that dynasty glow. To many, it probably looked like a consolation prize. But for Clark, it was liberation. At Iowa, she wasn't Paige's shadow. She wasn't Geno's afterthought. She was the recruit, the one who would carry the program. And from the very second she laced up in Iowa City, she absolutely rewrote the script. Her logo threes weren't just shots, they were statements. Her sold-out arenas weren't just crowds, they were proof. Her record-shattering TV ratings weren't flukes, they were receipts. Every single basket, every viral highlight, every broken record was a constant reminder, you missed this. Meanwhile, Gino, he completely doubled down. Instead of humility, he just leaned harder into arrogance. He brushed her off with condescending sound bites, even calling her a kid playing like she's in the driveway. Instead of acknowledging her as a generational force, he tried to shrink her brilliance into something ordinary. But ordinary doesn't sell out Madison Square Garden. Ordinary doesn't drag the WNBA into mainstream relevance, and ordinary definitely doesn't cost you millions, and that's exactly where the irony bites deepest. Gino closed the door when Caitlin Clark knocked. He genuinely thought she'd just fade into just another good player. Instead, she built the biggest empire women's basketball has ever seen, entirely without him. And when he finally circled back, contract in hand, Clark didn't rage, she didn't gloat, she simply said no, and that one word cost him more than a championship loss ever could. But Geno Auriemma just couldn't help himself, could he? Anytime Caitlin Clark's name even came up, he found a way to drag her back into Paige Bueckers' comparisons. If Clark was fearless, well, Paige was too. If Clark was connecting with fans, so had Paige. It wasn't random, it was strategy. By tethering Clark's rise to his chosen players, Geno kept himself in the spotlight. He desperately wanted the world to believe her success was nothing new, nothing separate from the dynasty he built. But those backhanded compliments were thin, and people noticed. Fans noticed, analysts noticed, other coaches noticed. They saw right through the act. Clark's brilliance didn't need qualifier. She was drawing bigger crowds than most professional franchises, breaking records the sport had never seen, and completely rewriting the conversation around women's basketball. Yet there was Geno, smiling for the cameras while subtly clinging to his throne. Behind all that charm was pure insecurity, the kind that comes when the spotlight is clearly moving away, and there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it. And eventually, the mask totally slipped. The sly digs weren't enough anymore. Geno went from undermining Clark to outright attacking the very people who supported her. For months, his strategy had been shade disguised as commentary. Then in June 2024, during an interview on The Dan Patrick Show, he crossed a line he could never ever walk back. The Hall of Fame coach, the man who was supposed to represent the pinnacle of women's basketball, didn't just question Caitlin Clark, he went after her fan.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on she's third or fourth in betting odds on being MVP of the WNBA. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. Okay, so the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning.
His words weren't subtle.
He actually called her supporters delusional. He outright said they didn't understand the game, and then, unbelievably, he claimed they were so clueless, they were actively damaging women's basketball itself. What was their supposed crime? Simply believing Clark could finish top 4 in MVP voting as a rookie. To Geno, that wasn't passion, it was pure stupidity. And as Diana Taurasi famously put it, this kid's in for a rude awakening. But hold up, think about that for a second. Millions of new eyes had just absolutely flooded into women's basketball because of Clark. Families were showing up in jerseys, kids were camping out just to meet her, and casual fans were tuning into WNBA broadcasts for the very first time ever. And Geno's response? It wasn't gratitude, it wasn't a celebration, it was a direct insult. Instead of welcoming this massive wave of new energy, he completely mocked it. This wasn't analysis. This wasn't a coach breaking down strengths and weaknesses. This was intensely personal. It was a direct shot at the very lifeblood of Clark's movement, the exact people who had carried women's basketball into the mainstream spotlight. Geno wasn't just dismissing Clark. He was dismissing the fans who made her rise possible. And because he's Geno Auriemma, people listen. His words carried immense weight, which is exactly what made them so damaging and so incredibly revealing. By calling her fans clueless, he wasn't just underestimating them, he was fundamentally underestimating her. He was saying the hype wasn't real, that the success wasn't sustainable, that in the end he'd be proven right. But here's where the story gets absolutely delicious. Geno wasn't right. He wasn't even close. Clark didn't clap back on Twitter. She didn't cut interviews short. She didn't need to. Her response came in the only place that truly mattered, the court. And what followed wasn't just vindication, it was a total demolition of Geno's credibility. Caitlin Clark went out and won Rookie of the Year. She didn't stop there. She made the All-WNBA first, and when the MVP votes were finally counted, she finished exactly 4th, right where her supposedly delusional fans had predicted she would. The very prediction Geno laughed at became reality, and with it his authority completely crumbled. This wasn't just a win for Clark, it was complete vindication for her fans, the ones he had mocked and insulted. Every parent who brought their kid to see her, every casual fan who tuned in, every new supporter who bought into the hype, Geno dismissed them as a problem. Clark proved they were prophetic. And the sheer beauty of it, she did it all without saying a single word. Silent revenge. No rant, no confrontation, no drama, just result. Night after night, she delivered performances that left absolutely no room for excuses. Logo threes, crossovers that froze defenders, assists that lit up highlight reels. By the time the awards came in, there was no debate. She had silenced him without ever speaking his name. Do you see the poetry in that? Geno had positioned himself as the ultimate gatekeeper of women's basketball knowledge. The wise elder who knew better than the fans, better than the media, better than anyone else. And yet, the fans were right. Clark was right. Geno was unequivocally wrong. Every arena she sold out, every record she shattered, every accolade she earned was another searing reminder that he wasn't the kingmaker anymore. She didn't need him. She never did. And here's the ultimate irony. Clark wasn't even trying to prove Geno wrong. She wasn't chasing his approval. She wasn't even thinking about him. She was just being Caitlin Clark. And that, my friends, was enough to expose him, enough to humble him, enough to show the world that he was no longer the one shaping the narrative. By the end of her rookie year, it wasn't just about whether Clark had lived up to the hype, it was about how completely she had obliterated every single doubt. Geno's insults didn't age well. In fact, they aged like milk in the sun. His comments about her fans now read like some of the absolute worst takes in sports history. Bitter, insecure, and embarrassingly wrong. But Geno just couldn't let go. Being wrong wasn't something he could stomach. And by now, it wasn't just about Clark's game. It was about what she represented. The changing of the guard, the seismic shift in power, the undeniable truth that women's basketball no longer revolved around him. And instead of accepting it, he did what he always does. He kept talking, interview after interview, podcast after podcast. Her name was never far from his lips, and each time, the pattern repeated. A little praise, a little dig, a compliment wrapped in a disclaimer. But the more he talked, the more obvious it became. Caitlin Clark wasn't just rewriting the record books. She was living completely rent-free in Geno Auriemma's head. At some point, words just stopped being enough. Geno Auriemma had spent months trying to shape the narrative with sly comparisons, backhanded compliments, and digs at Clark's fans. But Clark kept winning, kept shining, and his influence kept shrinking. So he pivoted. If he couldn't control the narrative with his mouth, maybe he could do it with money. And that, my friends, is exactly how the $1 million offer came into play. By then, Geno had already tried absolutely everything. He ignored her as a teenager. He brushed off her meteoric rise. He belittled her supporters. He even tried to reframe her stardom as just another byproduct of UConn's dynasty. None of it worked. Clark kept climbing, and Geno kept fading. Then came an opportunity wrapped in dollar signs. A brand new venture called Unrivaled, a 3-on-3 women's league backed by stars like Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, with Geno himself deeply involved behind the curtain. The league had ambition, it had funding, but it didn't have the one thing that mattered most, a face.
And there's a lot of investors in this league. One investor, been trying to keep quiet about, his investment in the league ever since his comments that he made about a young rookie. Pretty much, had him in the headlines for about a month and a half. That is Geno Auriemma, dog. I'm here to tell you, he's part owner of this.
This league, unrivaled. And that, my friends, is exactly when Geno's desperation was laid completely bare, because for all the big names involved, only one single player could give this project instant legitimacy. Only one athlete could drag in millions of fans, media partners, and crucial sponsors. Only one star had the kind of gravitational pull to truly turn Unrivaled into a real rival for the WNBA. And that star, as you might guess, was Caitlin Clark. And so Geno did the unthinkable. He came knocking. Reports confirmed that the league offered Clark over $1 million for just an 8-week season, easily one of the richest contracts ever presented in women's basketball. Let that sink in for a moment. The same coach who once wouldn't even pick up the phone during her recruitment was now dangling 7 figures, practically begging her to save his new league. The same man who told the world her hype wasn't real was suddenly trying to monetize it. The same coach who called her fans delusional now desperately needed those exact delusional fans to stream his games and buy his tickets. Honestly, the irony was absolutely delicious.
Well, look like Geno Auriemma could be the reason why Caitlin Clark is definitely not joining the unrivaled 3-on-3 basketball league.
And make no mistake about it, this wasn't just business. This was deeply, intensely personal. If Geno had somehow landed Clark, he could have completely twisted the story. He could have claimed her meteoric rise was still tied to his system, his vision, his authority. He could have presented her as an extension of the empire he built, rather than the undeniable symbol of its collapse. But Clark, she wasn't fooled for a second. When those contracts landed on her desk, she didn't see opportunity. She saw a test, a desperate power grab from a man who had spent years doing nothing but trying to minimize her.
They've tried to do everything they could to make the most of the situation. They tried to make the most of Caitlin Clark not playing by hinting everything and basically making people think that Caitlin Clark was going to play.
Her answer was swift, and it was absolutely devastating. No. No explanations, no hedging, no hesitation, just that one powerful word that carried more weight than all of Geno's interviews combined. She didn't need his money. She didn't need his platform. She didn't need his approval. The very man who had once brushed her aside was now literally asking for help, and she declined with a quiet grace that cut deeper than any clapback ever could. And with that no, the humiliation was complete. Geno Auriemma, the self-proclaimed gatekeeper who built his reputation on spotting and molding talent, had been reduced to offering a fortune to the one player he once dismissed, and she turned him down flat, quietly, decisively, without bitterness, without drama, just pure unadulterated rejection. The fallout for Unrivaled was absolutely brutal. Without Clark, the league immediately lost its magnet, its centerpiece, its entire credibility. That $1 million offer suddenly became less a show of strength and more an undeniable admission of profound weakness. The project needed her far more than she ever needed it, and when she simply walked away, the hype surrounding Unrivaled completely collapsed before it even started. Fans knew exactly what they were watching unfold. Social media absolutely lit up with laughter and mockery, clowning Geno for thinking Clark would ever save him after years of relentless disrespect. The chess match he thought he was orchestrating ended in a single move, and Clark didn't even break a sweat. She didn't rant. She didn't drag him. She didn't even acknowledge him beyond her simple decision. She just walked away. And that silence, my friends, hurt more than any words possibly could, because here's the undeniable truth. Geno's era is officially over. His power is gone. And Caitlin Clark didn't just dethrone him, she completely torched the throne entirely. For decades, Geno and the old guard decided who mattered in women's basketball. They controlled the pathways, the narratives, the opportunities. If you wanted to be great, you absolutely had to go through them. But Clark shattered that entire model. She didn't need UConn's banners to validate her. She didn't need Geno's blessing to shine. She built her empire from scratch. And in rejecting his $1 million offer, she sent a clear, powerful message. The future belongs to the players, not the gatekeepers. That's precisely why this story stings so deeply for Geno. His biggest mistake wasn't just ignoring Clark as a recruit. His biggest mistake was arrogantly assuming the sport couldn't grow without him. He thought he was indispensable. She unequivocally proved he was irrelevant, and the humiliation didn't just belong to him. It was a warning shot to every coach, every executive, every power broker still desperately clinging to the illusion of control. Clark's rejection wasn't just personal revenge, it was a cultural phenomenon. It marked a definitive shift in power, a line in the sand between the old guard and the new. She showed an entire generation of athletes they don't need permission, validation, or approval to lead. They've got the fans, they've got the numbers, and they've got the undeniable star power to chart their own path. And she proved it all with the simplest of weapons, a single resounding no. So maybe the old saying is wrong after all. Maybe revenge isn't best served cold. Maybe the sweetest revenge is actually served quietly, with calm finality, in the form of one powerful rejection that exposes just how utterly desperate your enemy has become. Caitlin Clark didn't just reject a contract, she rejected Geno's system, his authority, his entire worldview, and in doing so, she didn't just win, she absolutely changed the game. Do you think Geno deserved it? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. And hey, if you love this breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss out on our next deep dive. Click on the video you see on the screen now, and we'll catch you there.